You're listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
It's me, Davey, from the BQN Podcast Network, welcoming you to the finale of I'm Not Crying, You're Crying, also known as Let's Fly. This has been our limited run YouTube and podcast series where each week we bring a whole bunch of our network patrons into a live panel to recap and discuss the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery's final season. That's right, and it is an extension of another program that we do called the BQN Hive Mind, where once a month we get our network patrons together and we just have a good old chat about all things Star Trek, everything Star Trek happening right now. So if you would like to be a part of that and other future network perks, please sign up to be a patron over at patreon.com/BQN. So we've come, this is it, it's the end of the road. It's been a long road getting from there to here, but here we are, life itself. Star Trek Discovery is over. The journey has ended. We have discovered all kinds of things along the way. And since I just wasted a whole bunch of time with my microphone not working, I'm going to bring in today's panel. We've got welcoming back JJ, Jonathan, Peter, Jim, and for the first time to Let's Fly, Trexperts Quiz associate producer, Jerry Antimano. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Let's do a quick whip around and just let's have a little bit of a group therapy session and talk about what are you feeling right now that Star Trek Discovery is over. I'll go around the screen. JJ, how are you feeling post the finale?
A little sad, obviously. It's sad to see that this show has come to an end. But like a friend reminded me, like we can always go back and rewatch the show. So the tears dried up pretty quickly. But yeah, overall, it was a pretty good season. Enjoyed it. Sad to see it's done with, though.
Yeah, a bit of a don't be sad it's over, but be glad that it happened kind of moment. Peter, what about you?
Yeah, actually, I feel the same way. Also a little bit sad. I think the season was, excellent, very good. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad that we did experience it, and looking forward to sort of the next phase or the next part of the franchise and whatever plans that they have going. But definitely felt a little bit melancholy today after watching it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like it or not, depending on your view of Discovery, it's been the flagship show which brought Star Trek back into a new golden age. So there's a lot to be appreciative of. Jonathan, I'll go to you next because you also did a rewatch of the whole season in the last week. So how has that kind of impacted your appreciation of the finale?
Yes, I did a rewatch of the entire season and then also made sure to go back and watch Calypso so I could try to have everything fresh in my mind and put it into context. And I'm glad I did. Like everyone said, I'm sad that it's over. But as we know, all good things must come to an end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry, I just had to throw that in there. But it makes me really grateful more than anything else that Discovery existed. I mean, if you recall in 2017 when this came out, there had not been a Star Trek on for a while. The last one before it was considered a failure by the network, and we never thought we'd get a Star Trek again, let alone this entry that opened the door to usher in the golden age of Star Trek. We got multiple series out of it, and I do think that in rewatching the season, it was time for the series to come to an end. and we'll go more into it, but in pure Discovery fashion, it's going to have many people happy, many people wanting more. Some people are going to be upset, and more questions maybe than answers.
That's if there's something I could probably use to sum up Discovery, it's mixed bag is the term I would use. Jim, how about you?
Pretty much the same. I'm sad to see it go. Loved the season so far. Loved all the classic Trek references that we got throughout the season. And I'm hopeful for the future.
Yeah. I'd like to think, I mean, whilst there's a bit of the momentum has kind of slowed a little bit, I'd like to think that there's still more to come. Maybe we're going to focus on a little bit more quality over quantity, who knows. Jerry, our first timer, how are you feeling, my friend?
Yeah, I'm feeling actually quite hopeful for the rest of the sort of iterations of Trek that are coming through now. It is quite sad, and I feel like Discovery was really starting to really find its feet now. You know, where they were sort of like what Enterprise was at the end of their 4th season. And it's a shame it had to come to an end, but I think they gave everyone a really good send-off. I know the writers obviously tried to tie up as many loose ends as they could, but as a sort of a contained finale for season 5 and season 5 itself, I think they took us on a really good journey, and they did a lot of new stuff, but tied in a lot of the old stuff and gave us a lot of Easter eggs and stuff to look out for too. So yeah, a bit of a mixed bag, like you said, and pretty much what I think everyone else on the panel is sort of feeling right now.
Yeah, I think I feel the same. It's bittersweet, and I think whenever a Star Trek ends, and it's been a while. I mean, obviously we had Picard, but it's been a while since a real long-running Star Trek like this has come to this kind of emotional conclusion. What I've really loved seeing is that there's a lot of people out there now who like say how TNG is my Trek and was my big introduction to sci-fi and the world of Star Trek. There's actually a lot of people out there now with Discovery is their Trek, especially people in LGBTI community as well, and people from more diverse backgrounds. This was finally the Trek where people got to see themselves in the Trek galaxy for the first time. And it actually means a lot to some people who will tell you, like, no, never watched TNG, never watched Voyager, Discovery, that's my Star Trek. And I think that's kind of cool. I remember going to STLV just before Discovery started airing. And they had a panel. I think Wilson Cruz was there, and they were talking about what to expect on the show. And a parent got up with her child and said, "Thank you for creating a Star Trek that is going to be my children's Star Trek, like the old one was mine." So that was super cute. Super cute. Got some reactions in the chat as well. We've got Matt Jennings in there from the BQN. Can't believe it's over. Kevin felt the finale felt a little bit rushed at times. It's an interesting thought. I think we'll probably dive into a little bit of that pacing as we go through this conversation. But let's jump into the main element of the finale, which was wrapping up the story arc of season 5, the final season, which was the quest for the progenitor's tech. And I wonder what they actually thought that they were going to find, right? They're like, oh, we're just going to this technology, like it's going to be an iPad at the end of this tunnel that's going to have like the specs for creation of life everywhere. I want to just get reactions, I guess, from everyone on this whole conclusion to the progenitors. We find Michael and Mull in this weird little hall of mirrors, which kind of goes to different planets that have been created, and there's a bit of action going on. JJ, how did you find, or how satisfying did you find all of this?
So I actually was excited for the different, like, well, this whole scene, right? Like, it was really exciting. I liked how they presented it. It gave you this impression about, what the progenitors potentially were and how they seeded those planets. The fight scenes were, they're a little much. I think the arguing between Maul and Burnham was also a little much, but overall, I thought the whole experience was satisfactory for me. Like, you kind of brought it to a close for me.
Okay. And what about I don't know, Jonathan, this for me, there was some really, classic Discovery, big cinematic kind of vibe, especially to this whole scene in the Hall of Mirrors. I'm going to keep calling it the Hall of Mirrors, by the way.
Yeah.
How did you find it?
So I wrote down over and over and over the word epic. Every season of Discovery tried to take it to this cinematic level and up at another level and up at another level. And we get that again. And I actually really appreciate and love what they did here with this, it being inside the wormhole. You wonder, what are we going to get? And I love this depiction as this almost like a zoo type vibe thing that we've seen in some other Star Treks and other sci-fis on how this is being manipulated. And, I wondered, how are they going to, again, did they try to outdo themselves? How are we going to make the fight scene more epic? Because it was never really in my mind of Maul ever being able to take on Michael Burnham, right? Mm-hmm. But then this, gravity mind-bending scape takes it to this other element where, like, well, now anything's possible because they're in this weird situation. So, of course, Discovery taking it to this, like, try to epic level of fighting. Later on, we see that epic space battle that, of course, ends with Discovery's unique way of being able to end things, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But as far as this room is, I really love the way that they did this as this window effect of having these different type of atmospheres. I always wish that, like, okay, play with a little bit more. I wanted to see some more environments that they could have gone in and out of, but I'm really happy with what they did here.
Mm. I also wonder as well, with some of the themes of faith and religion that ran through the whole season, there's literally a light at the end of this tunnel. And I wonder, is this heaven? Is this actually, could this actually be where the whole idea of heaven potentially came from? Jerry, what are your thoughts on this?
That you mention it, there's a lot of sort of like religious sort of contexts that they've got in, I guess, this room piece with, like you said, light at the end of the tunnel, and they have all these bits that sort of look like the Garden of Eden and stuff. And then obviously you've got like the triangles that they had to all fit together. And obviously, I guess if you know Christianity, there's a whole Trinity piece to religion as well. So I think a lot of that was probably done relatively on purpose. But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's totally on an epic scale. I was a bit scared at first in terms of, like, when I saw the progenitors, the portal thing, it looked very Borgy to me. So I was like, please only be the Borg. Like, it looked Borgy on the outside, but it sort of gave me, I don't know, sort of TARDIS vibes, because you got like this small sort of capsule, and then when you go in it, it's bigger on the inside, of course, as you can see. And those of you Doctor Who fans that have seen the new season or series, they did make a Star Trek reference. So I wouldn't have been mad if Michael Burnham stepped through and would have seen the Doctor. I'm sure a crossover is very much on the cards, hopefully at some point, based on a line in the new Doctor Who series.
Yeah. Well, if Disney eats up Star Trek like it has Doctor Who and Star Wars, then you never know.
Anything's possible.
Interesting that you mentioned the triangles and whether there's some sort of religious iconography kind of going on there with the Holy Trinity. Because I must admit, at first, I was like, that's a bit basic, isn't it? I was like, that looks like one of the brain training puzzles I do on my phone every morning before I go to work. But
are you saying you had solved this before she did?
I mean, it was gonna be. I mean, yeah. I mean, it was gonna be either one or the other. But I wonder what would have happened to Mole if Michael hadn't interrupted. Who knows? Who knows? Jim, I'll hand over to you. So, how did you feel about, like, what did you take away from all of this? What was your interpretation of what was going on here?
Okay, first off, though, you mentioned heaven. I gotta say, what does God need with a starship?
Didn't need one, apparently.
Yeah, no, but moving on. Like, I got serious Doctor Strange vibes from like the inside of the portal, like the whole mind bending, gravity twisting of the inside, like that just like rang like really like what happened in the last Doctor Strange movie when he was in that warped reality. Like that came off as very similar to that to me, and but I like that whole sequence in general.
Yeah, it was a really entertaining opening to the finale, and I think it looked brilliant. It didn't seem to, there's been a lot of discovery where I'm like,
got it. I think those effects will stand up to the test of time, personally.
We've got some people in the chat mentioning that, the use of the AR wall, which, Star Trek has very heavily adopted. But this was good because there have been times throughout this season where I know that they're looking at the AR wall. And this didn't. I didn't feel like I was staring at the AR wall. Like the whole narrative kind of dream didn't get broken for me. I was there. I was invested. And Peter, I'll wrap up kind of this section with yourself. What did you take away from, the Great Hall of the Progenitors?
Yeah, no, I mean, just echoing what's been said. I mean, I really enjoyed the visual effects part of that scene. It reminded me a little bit of actually going back all the way to the beginning of Star Trek, The Cage, because in The Cage, the Telosians had sort of a menagerie of different aliens from different planets. So this is a sort of different portals to different planets. So it kind of reminded me of that. And then just one quick thing is, it's Star Trek Resurgence was a video game that I played a little bit earlier this year. Star Trek Resurgence, and a lot of that, the Infinity Tunnel, or this tunnel reminded me of several sections in that game, which kind of takes place in this similar type environment, bigger on the inside, and it just sort of just keeps going and going. So it kind of had a little bit of a similar to that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've played Resurgence, and that focuses on what's the alien race from The Last Outpost?
The Takan.
Yeah, the Takan.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Which
I can see where you were going with that, Peter. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because inside the spaceship, and there was various sections, and it just reminded me of that orange infinity. It just goes forever and forever. So yeah, but I enjoyed that sequence, and it was good. And then finally, I kind of realized now where that last section, the last snippet from the main titles comes from, because that last section of the season 5 main titles was from that scene. So it's like, that's where it came from. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We've got this is further adding to Star Trek's almost very rich tapestry of the history of the universe now as well, because I mean, the progenitors, it's kind of hinted that they were around billions of years ago. But then there's a bit of a revelation here that, well, guess what? This isn't their technology. They just found it. So it's actually...
I loved that twist. Yeah. It kind of leaves you with a mystery, like, who built the technology then?
What I liked about that was there was a little bit of well, guess what? There are some things that we may just never know. Like we may never know the history of the universe or who created it. So there was a little bit of, again, leading into that whole faith and religion kind of thing. It's like,
I know, which kind of left you kind of like sorry for Stamets at the end there when he like really, really, really wanted to examine the technology.
yeah. And then, of course, we have, where we kind of wound up with Mol and Locke. I've got thoughts on this, but I want to whip around the room and see how everyone found how this played out. JJ, I'll start with you.
It wrapped up really quickly for me, right? It was like suddenly just done. Although I appreciate how the finality of it, right? I'm glad that they didn't bring him back. It just was a little abrupt for me.
Yeah, I
So,
agree. For
a little shocked by that.
Yeah, for how invested they were in each other, and Mol was willing to lead the Breen into a galactic war to bring her lover back, and then it's just kind of like, poof, done. Jonathan, what are your thoughts on this?
So first, I want to say I love that they talk about basically you can't use this to bring back the dead. So that solves and wraps up a whole bunch of these other possible storylines and means that you're not bringing him back, as well as not bringing back Quajon and all these other things. So I love that is a very clear line that they draw.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, my biggest disappointment in this episode is that when Mol holds on to that and starts to get shocked, that she doesn't slowly and excruciatingly like burst into flames and die a slow, painful, horrible, memorable death, like the worst, most painful death that we've seen in all of Star Trek. She deserved to die. I don't like her, at the end, all right, just do a little mystery time in prison. And they've already got a job for her. Well, I hope that job is like scrubbing dilithium, okay? Terrible. No redemption. Did not care for that. So I was frustrated by that entire part, because they even make a whole point of talking about like the one other person that made it through, like someone died in the whole pile of rocks. So like, what makes Mol so special? Mol totally should have died after everything that has happened. I don't know why they didn't kill her off.
Interesting. It would have, given the passion of their love and the sort of toxicity of that connection.
I think it would have been a better story all around. I mean, sure, it leaves like Book without someone to possibly mentor at some point down the line, but we don't need that. And when we see the fast forward, there's no mention of her again, or whether or not he did anything to help redeem her, or she did anything to redeem herself. So I think it would have been a much more satisfying story if she had died when she tried to use it, and to like show, yes, that's how dangerous this technology is.
Yeah. I wonder, and Jerry, I wonder what you think about this. Were we looking at a situation where perhaps there was more plans for Mol if there was to be a season 6 and that connection with Book and what have you? Or do you think the writers got lazy and tried to wrap her story up?
Yeah, maybe it was a bit of a missed opportunity. And unfortunately for you, Jonathan, I think that Mol may return for the Section 31 movie, which is
Please, don't ruin it for me like that. I have hope for this
which
film.
is probably where this is going.
I have hope for this film. I have high standards, and that would be the one thing that really please don't do that to us.
No, but I agree with Jonathan.
And you haven't done the editing yet. Please don't do that to us.
But I agree with Jonathan. Not necessarily that maybe Mol should have died, but I'm quite happy that, and the chat may come for me, but I'm quite happy they didn't bring Quajon back using the technology, and they didn't find sort of some loophole to reverse all the bad things that happened throughout the years and stuff. Because then I feel like it just like there are no stakes in like any of the things that have happened up to now. So I quite like the way that they sort of resolved that with, we can't bring back new life, or you can, but the new versions will not be the same sort of essence of what people knew before.
Well, and just to add a little bit onto that is Star Trek has always done a really good job of reminding us that like you can't change the past, right? All you can do is accept and move on from it. It's been one of the legacies and lessons that Star Trek has tried to portray throughout its many decades is we have to learn from the past. We can't just change the past. Mm-hmm. Even in these time travel episodes, the whole part is do not change the past. So I think that's something that is very well done in making it clear, like you can't just bring back. So yeah, people may be frustrated by that, but it goes to show like everything matters, right? Life now matters. If they can bring back anyone, then nothing really matters. It doesn't matter. There are no stakes, but the fact that they can't bring people back, it does show like all that really matters is now.
100%. Yeah, it's Mol and Locke aside. I mean, I feel that this was, two very interesting characters that kind of got a little mistreated towards the end of the season. But in terms of how we've wrapped up the progenitors as kind of the big mystery of the season, it is definitely Discovery's finest moment in how it's done that. For me, anyway, because I know people feel very strongly about how some of the previous season's mysteries have wrapped up. The Red Angel, it was just Michael all along. The burn, it was just a screaming child. I didn't mind the 10C resolution. It was just a miscommunication, a huge miscommunication. I know that some people didn't enjoy that. I quite liked it. I thought this was one of the most cleverly done wrap-ups that we've had. And just as you would expect from Discovery, though, what we've got on the screen right now, swing and a miss in terms of how you wrap this up. Jim, were you hoping for more for Mol and Locke in the end?
Not really. We kind of got what I expected. I was praying that we would not get Locke, that they would not bring back Locke, and thank God that they didn't. Although I will admit, for someone who was these last 3 episodes just like battling to bring the love of her life back, when Burnham tells, we've already agreed, when Burnham tells her it's not possible, like she gives up easily. She just abandons the body and just leaves it there to rot in that in that construct inside a wormhole, like for the rest of time.
Yeah,
that is terrible.
True. I mean, we don't know if they brought his body back or not, do we? I mean,
no. I mean, like we don't see the body again ever.
Yeah, very unusual. Very unusual.
Like for someone who supposedly that was the love of her life, that's pretty damn callous.
Mm-hmm.
Slow, painful death.
Everyone's having a bit of a giggle in the chat, Jonathan, about, as Matt Jennings describes it, your daggers for Mol. And Peter, let's round out the Mol and Locke conversation, and before we never talk about them again, so Jonathan's happy. How are you feeling about the conclusion of their story?
I mean, I was okay with it. I mean, I was a little bit, a part of me was hoping that they would resurrect Locke, so, sort of right off to the sunset together. But I think, when you look at, if I were to look at sort of season 5 as a whole, I felt that at least the Mol character probably was the one that didn't click as much with compared to some of the other, threads and stories and things. And I felt Mol, I think when we had the 2 of them together, I kind of liked that pairing. But I think once it was just Mol, it was a little bit harder for her to sort of carry that role. So yeah, but it was okay, I guess. And I did thought that, actually, I thought when Michael told her what had happened and we couldn't bring Locke back, she kind of touched that thing on her sleeve that was holding him. So I thought that he would ended up sort of go back into that device and they would leave with him. Not so much the physical body, but I guess whatever, in stasis or something. So that was how I interpret. But I could be wrong. I hadn't had a chance to watch that scene again after the first time. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I personally am putting down what's happened with Mullen Locke as a symptom of how the show was cancelled. It was they decided to focus. They needed to round that off quickly and focus more on the fact that the show was coming to an end.
That might explain why we never saw the body again.
Yeah, exactly. So we've touched a little bit on this already, but we've re-met the progenitors. What did we think of the progenitors and their whole epic arc to, they were waiting for billions and billions of years to pass their technology on to someone worthy. JJ, how did you find this, and how was it satisfying to you, or did you want more? Talk us through your thoughts.
I did want more, actually. So it was a little exciting for me that the progenitors were still there, in the sense that like her mind was there, right? And she was waiting for Burnham. And then, of course, the revelation that that technology was there before them. And they simply just used it to increase the diversity, to have more, species out there other than just them. So I found that very fascinating. But I don't know, this scene kind of left me wanting a little bit more. I don't know exactly what more I wanted, but I just, when it was done, I was like, okay, that seemed to be a little premature for me.
One of the funniest comments I saw, I think it was from Kelvin from the BQN, who said that Michael Burnham had decided that the galaxy had reached its diversity quota and that there was no longer a need for the progenitors technology. Jonathan, I wonder if, because we've had this whole revelation that actually it's not the progenitors tech, they were just caretaking something that had come way before them. So there's no telling how old this was or where it came from. Do you think that this is the only platform or piece of tech that whoever this ancient race of beings is left behind, or could this exist is this just our galaxy's version of it, and could it exist elsewhere? What are your thoughts on where this came from?
Well, I like the way that they made this a mystery, so that we don't have a straightforward answer. In my own mind, I started to wonder about the Q. Were they involved in this in some way, shape, or form? Because this would be an easy way for them to move around and manipulate, an entire galaxy if they wanted to. I like that this has existed hidden for a while, Discovery taking place so far in the future. So we could see this incorporated in, other shows. Obviously, not the Academy one, as that will take place after this. But we could see it, mentioned in a Lower Decks or Strange New Worlds, or, pop up in Prodigy or something to that effect, or at least alluded to it. I'm on the side of Stamets here, is that there's a missed opportunity, right? We don't know what the limitations of this technology is, but it does seem to be hinted at that it almost is like the power of Q to be able to manipulate space and time, in which case, like, if before you're going to go shut this thing off, like maybe create a couple dilithium planets and, some fresh water and, some resources to have to spread around and go around. Because one of the mentions I hear is they say Talaxian pirates. And I'm like, what happened to the Talaxians over the last 800 years that they've resorted to piracy now? And they're also made it to the Alpha Quadrant, but they're not doing that well. So there's, definitely could have used this technology for a little bit of good. I understand the temptation, they're not going to do that because there's a temptation of imbalance and then going to make things worse. But, obviously I'm on the side of Stamets and wanted to know more about this technology, and let's use it for a little bit of good. Why not?
Mm. Yeah. And the Q were always worried about humanity's potential. So Q always said,
well, and then to add on, sorry to interrupt you, but the progenitor, when they, in the original chase, all they had to do to get this message to activate was getting the different pieces of DNA, which caused the sequence to open. They allude here in this episode that when the previous scientist comes, they're like, oh, here you go. You able to figure out how to get here, so you have the power to go ahead and use it. And that scientist said, whoa, no, we are not ready. Please let me devise some sort of test or plan. And then whoever that person is, you will be able to do this. So the progenitors seem to be like, hey, if you can make it here, this is yours technology. Do what you want with it. They didn't seem to be the ones worried about like you have to be the true appropriate person. That was the scientist who found it. They're like, whoa, please do not. And then even Burnham's like, I'm not sure I should have this power. Like, no, you pass the test. Like, you're good. Please, it's yours now.
Yeah, look, there's always going to be little things like that when you're dealing with these kind of plots, which are so epic in their scale and mind-bending as well. One thing I want to touch on, though, we've talked a lot about the progenitors and what was happening, inside their little kind of realm of mystery. But meanwhile, outside, Discovery was getting beat the fuck up, like, for quite a while. And it was the return of my least favorite thing on the Discovery Bridge set, which is that random burst of flame that you can see over the back of Rayna. Like, it just happens. There's just flame balls going out everywhere for no reason whatsoever. Jerry, how did you enjoy this action? Like, I liked the action sequence that was kind of going on in the battles. It felt a little drawn out. Like, I was like, how much punishment can this one ship take? How did you find this?
Yeah, I didn't think it was drawn out at all. If anything, I feel like there could have been a little bit more, maybe sort of added in terms of sort of the, I guess, I don't want to say easy tie up of like Discovery getting rid of the fighters and then coming up with the whole source of separation thing, and then doing the whole, jumping the Breen away and stuff, which I thought was all really awesome. I feel like that happened all pretty quickly. And I like the way that like the action was sort of overlaid with the progenitor speaking as well, because you had all that, sort of her talking about how important life is to specific people. And it had like that montage of like Rayna and Tilly and Book and everybody else when she was mentioning specific words and stuff. I thought that was that was really, really well done. And I also feel like no one really got sidelined too much. Everyone had a part to play, which is really nice. And it wasn't just, Michael Burnham saves the universe by herself again, which was, again, I think what Star Trek is all about. It's including everybody to solve the problem, the sort of the wider problem and stuff, which, I feel Discovery has sort of suffered from in the past and hasn't done as well as maybe some of the other Star Trek shows. The only thing that I would have maybe liked to see more is, more of Jet Reno, who's my favorite character, and it would have been just good to have like more the old crew back as well, like Owo and Detmer too.
I do feel you mentioned the jumping of the Breen ship away there, so I wonder if the next Star Trek series is going to be a sequel to Star Trek Voyager, and it's going to be Star Trek Dreadnought, the tale of the Breen trying to make their way back home from the galactic barrier. And if they do happen to find their way back quickly, man, are they going to be pissed off? Jim, your thoughts on the big action going on with the Discovery outside of the progenitors' House of Mystery?
First off, I just want to say quickly about the progenitor scene itself. I desperately wanted a Jeffrey Combs guest spot during that scene with the progenitor.
I mean, we always desperately want a Jeffrey Combs guest spot. Like, every episode, I'm like, is he going to be in it? Oh, no.
Yeah. Like, I wanted him so badly to come out and say, Founder, how may I serve you today?
I mean, that would have been perfect. That would have been perfect.
Yeah, but as for the action sequence itself, like, I loved it. I thought it was like really inventive, coming up with like separating the nacelles and getting them to like jump the Breen ships. Like,
yeah, you just have to trust that that's how the science would work. Yeah,
yeah. Like, and you can imagine, like, whatever Breen took command of the Dreadnought after Maul left, when that happened, and they found themselves at the edge of the galaxy, you can imagine he probably was saying the Breen equivalent of "What the bleep just happened."
Exactly, and it's I mean, it's a little insidious. It's like, well, they're not going to be dead, but hey, they're
No,
going to be far enough away
they-
to never cause
yeah.
us a problem ever again.
Yeah,
for-
no, they're going to be scratching their helmets, wondering what happened. And can you only imagine the cover story or whatever story the President Rillick probably would have to say to the Breen government for when they do come back?
I guess it wouldn't have really mattered, to be honest, because there was no leader or anything on that ship, right? There was pretty much a house broken, so to speak.
Yeah, you're probably right, but they would still have to say something, though.
Yeah.
60 years later, 60, 70 years later, assuming they make it,
Yeah.
that's a chance they're willing to take and deal with.
And then Peter, we had Action Saru back. A bit of a different take on Saru. Here he is doing this negotiation to get the other Primarch to turn around. Like, are you insane, Ambassador? And then we find out, okay, so maybe his species have changed a little bit because he's all like, no, I'm a predator and you are my prey. How did you find Saru, the wrap up to sort of Saru's arc? I mean, this is Saru's arc of the whole series, really, from fret ganglia and scared Timidlet not to do anything to like, I am gonna fuck you up. How did you find it?
Yeah, no, I liked it. Like you said, when I was watching that scene, it reminded me of comparing him now to the beginning of season 1 and how much has he changed over the seasons and over the years. So I like the way they kind of expanded his what he can do and making threats or making giving a test for Tahal, for the Primarch, and kind of tricking her to admitting, that area of space was important or something like that. So I think, that was something that he probably would not have done, in seasons 1 or 2, but by now, and after all the experience he's been through and, all the missions he's been through and, going from, first officer to captain to ambassador, and going on this mission, I think it was a nice way to kind of wrap up the character. I mean, Saru is actually my favorite Discovery character on the show, so I really enjoyed him, seeing his development. So I liked and he played I was glad that he came back in the last couple of episodes after being away for a little while, and they gave him, it was an important thing that he had to do. And in a way, this actually contrasted a little bit with the, the action scenes, because this is a little bit more of a diplomacy, sequence, more of a talking. But it was good. It contrasted with what Michael was going through and what Discovery was going through with, with the fight. So I think, I enjoyed it. It was a good part of the episode.
It was very interesting diplomacy. JJ, Kevin in the chat has sort of suggested maybe his gambit that he took with the Breen here paid off a little bit too easily. What do you think on that?
I actually liked that whole scene. I liked how he approached it. He was confident with, his assessment of, her troops and her positioning. It kind of showed that his species has become kind of a predator, and how he analyzes things and perceives threats, and has a kind of like a couple steps ahead of them about how he's going to address this. I did not feel like it ended too easily. I actually enjoyed it. I felt that this was well done, actually, for this particular scene.
And Jonathan, were you vibing Action Saru in this whole sequence?
Yeah, I love this scene and the way that it's done. I think it's a perfectly classic, like, Federation type of maneuver, showing that power through information and cooperation, it can be much more powerful than power through just simple strength, as the Breen seem to be viewing things. So, Saru going on there without any kind of weapons, you think, all right, is he insane as the line starts off? And I think that's humorous. It's well done. And really, he ultimately very quickly shows the Breen, like, I'm smarter than you, and you've just acknowledged that in the second contact, when he says, well, I know why you turned me down, because that's where you're hiding your troops, and you just confirmed that. And they say something effective like, amusing or interesting. Like, why should I care? And it's like, well, I just proved to you that I'm already smarter than you. I got you to admit to something that you've been trying to keep a secret. And now you're definitely going to believe me when I say, like, we will destroy your ability to ever, take control of the empire if you do not turn around and back down. You're talking about ifs and maybes, what might happen. I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen. So I think it's a perfectly classic Federation way that, you start off being diplomatic, and when and you're dealing with a force that you know is stronger than you, you come prepared saying, all right, here's my plan A. We will start off diplomatic. And when that doesn't work, I will show them that I actually do have the upper hand, and that if this was a game of chess, I already have checkmate. I was just trying to offer you the opportunity to save face. Now that you're not willing to be diplomatic, we'll go ahead and play your game your way, showing you that I've actually already won.
Yeah, it was a great, I think a great bit of writing for Saru and the character, and a wonderful way to sort of show his evolution and to treat the character very, very well in terms of who he is and the journey he's been on. And then we get his wedding. We got a very, I'm planning a wedding at the moment, and I want to have mine in a little floating bubble above a beach too. I wonder how much of a deposit I'll need for that. Jerry, a big one, especially if I'm going to do it on camera. So, Jerry, the wedding, Saru's wedding, was it everything you wanted it to be and more?
Yeah, I could tell that was probably one of the last sort of scenes that they probably filmed. I think for the finale, it was very it was very sweet, and it was very touching and stuff. But I felt like it was maybe lacking a little something. Like I was feeling like they could have added something in, or maybe they may have taken something out, because it felt a little bit rushed.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was just meant to be sort of more of a tie up in that sort of start of the epilogue piece and things. But yeah, like I appreciated all the different sort of interactions and stuff with like Tilly and Rayna sort of tying up their sort of relationship arc and things. And I always appreciate the uniforms. Of course, it's always great to see Starfleet dressed in all these different uniforms and stuff. So I really love that. The only thing I would say is that I don't like that Michael Burnham's captain's dress uniform looks flashier than Admiral Vance's Admiral dress uniform, which I thought was a bit strange. But it was probably because, again, it was after the fact, and I guess wardrobe had to come up with something quick, sharp for to include Admiral Vance in it in the end. And to the last scene about Saru, that was probably the best Saru scene that I've ever seen in Discovery, where he was doing the negotiation thing. And did anyone get sort of vibes that the Primarch was sort of flirting with him as well? She was like, "Ooh, you are insane." At the end. That was really funny.
I can imagine that would be kind of foreplay for a Breen in terms of that kind of verbal power play. Would bank up really well. Yeah, and it was a very brief wedding, and as Kevin's pointed out in the chat as well, and you could be right, Jerry. Maybe it did just kind of serve as a bit of a segue to the epilogue, which I want to dive into the epilogue, Sue, because there's quite a bit to unpack. But before we do, quick wrap up on sort of the main part and the big Easter egg, which was Daniels. Did anyone, Peter? Did you see that coming?
No, I didn't see that coming. I was pretty surprised, and I'm kind of happily surprised that it was Daniels. I actually like Enterprise, and I like Daniels on Enterprise. It was nice to sort of bring him back in this way. So I think it was a nice, and I like Kovich, and he had that mysterious air about him ever since we first saw him back in, I think, season 3. So it was good to sort of tie his character in. I actually like when they were showing the shots of the Chateau Picard wine and Geordie's visor and Cisco's baseball, I was kind of like wondering where they were going, because it sounded like something big was coming. And so when Kovic said that he was Daniels, and it was a nice way to wrap up that little part of him. And I think early in the season when he talked about the paper pad and the writing with pencils and kind of all those types of things, was maybe now, given that we know who he is, it kind of makes a little bit more sense now. So yeah, it was good. It was a good touch there.
Jim, how did you find the Daniel scene, and especially all the very specific little bits of memorabilia that Daniels had, which was like the baseball, the visor, the Chateau Picard. Clearly very interested in. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, I'm not joking when I say this. I actually shouted out, "Holy crap!"
Yeah.
Yeah, but on a little side note of my little opinion on the wedding, like, I definitely agreed that was rushed. Like, there were I get why it was that way, but there were several people who probably should have been in the scene that weren't. I'm talking people like Owo, Detmer, Reno, even. Like, these are characters who you would think should have been at Saru's wedding, not even in the scene whatsoever.
I mean, they do show up again in the epilogue, right? So,
Reno doesn't.
No, Reno's in the epilogue.
She's in the slow motion hugging scene.
Yeah, she's in the.
She does. But,
she's in this scene. I mean, not in this shot that I've got up at the moment, but there.
Well, I must have missed her then.
Yeah. She's there.
Yeah, it was quick. Yeah, it was quick though. Yeah.
Yeah. But she was actually there, unlike Wilson Cruz, who was not there, and they just used another shot of him from like another episode, because apparently
really?
Matt Harker mentioned this last week that. So when they all came back to film this scene for the epilogue, he was off filming something else and was not available. So that's you'll notice I was looking for it because Matt Harker told me that it happened, and so I'm waiting for it, and I'm like, oh, that's just from they've just like superimposed him from another episode. But let's dive into it. So the epilogue. So apparently all written, filmed, produced in about 8 weeks. I've got some personal thoughts. I really appreciated it for what it was and the fact that we actually got it. My favorite thing about it was Sonequa Martin Green's performance. Her performance as Alda Burnham was so tender and genuine and beautiful, and just showed her love of this character. And I don't know, I just bought the whole thing, and I just had such wonderful feels from her the whole time. Let's go through the panel and get everyone's overall thoughts on the epilogue. I'll start with you, JJ.
Yeah, so this when I started seeing her and her older self, I got tears, right? Like I remember that scene when she and Book in that tender moment where they're talking about the coffee and how he made it horrible for her. You know, it was a very warm, very inviting feeling. And then to see their son, to know that they had a son and that he's continuing down the path and that she's an admiral, it was very heartwarming. It brought several tears to my eyes. I had to, brush my eyes a few times during this scene to thoroughly enjoy it, but it felt right. It felt good. I liked it, how it closed it up. The only thing I would wish a little bit more is a little more action. I was really hoping that the entire crew was going to be at the end to fly the ship to wherever they're flying it for Calypso, I'm assuming. And then to see no one else join, I was really looking for that moment, but I just didn't get that moment. But otherwise, I loved it.
I know. I mean, I think you're dealing with the fact that, it was done the way it was done, right? They had to quickly get in there. CBS gave them like, all right, we've cancelled you. We've pulled the plug, but get in there. This was literally the only set left that had not already started to be torn down, apparently. We're so lucky that we got what we got, to be honest. Like, I mean, there's a bit of an air of mystery still there. Jonathan, your thoughts on the epilogue?
So I had two issues with this. One, the slow motion hugging under the glowing light. That could have been better off, in my opinion, if they had done a montage scene similar to what DS9 did. I don't know that was,
I was
the
waiting for
perfect way
that.
to end
Yeah.
things, but I think that would have been better and more appreciated. And, the reason why you didn't notice Jet Reno is because, no, you don't get to hear anyone speak. It's just, again, slow motion hugging underneath the light. So, like, that's totally a missed opportunity. The other thing is the very ending here. While I love the epic, sending off of Discovery, the more I spend time thinking about it, the more disturbed I become by this. So the way the scene leads up is Michael Burnham goes on to Discovery that looks like it's been turned off or left alone for a while, as if it's been, put off into storage. Why it's not being actively used, I don't know. I get it's an older ship, but it has literally like a sentient life operating it. So even if you just have it running like dilithium, that'll be, a lifer satisfying for it. Or even if you put it up in a museum, then, people interact with it to come by. Instead, they're standing it off in a place. And so when I went back and watched Calypso, Zora says it's been waiting there for 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
That is pretty sick and messed that they sent this ship off for its final mission to go sit out there and be alone, not to explore, not to do anything, just go in this area, sit and wait. I don't know why. They did that. Clearly, it was something that they we wanted to do a tie-in with Calypso, and you had to get it out there for some reason. But 1,000 years they sent it out there, that's messed up. There's no reason. It could have been doing other things for, let's say 900 years, and then you'd send it out there and make it wait only 100 years or something. But that was kind of sick and mean to do to Zora after everything Zora did for them and the crew.
I had that thought as well, actually, when that was playing out. I'm like, oh. But I can also appreciate that they were sort of they were trying to acknowledge Calypso and that it happened. I did read some interviews with some of the showrunners who said that the journey to Calypso was what they had in mind for season 6, which they thought probably would be the final season. So they've maybe tried to, I don't know, I think they tried to just acknowledge it without, having to get too deep into what it was, right? We're going to keep a bit of mystery there for you as well, so you can make up your own mind. Peter, what were your overall thoughts on the epilogue?
I mean, similar to what has already been said, I enjoyed it. I was a little bit emotional. There were definitely some scenes that I, was reminiscing of, of the 5 seasons, of the 7 years. I think I also wanted to see it was great to see the crew back, but I also wanted to for them to talk. So because we didn't really get that, and because it was more a visual, I was hoping we would, get some speeches or some talk. And related to the Calypso, I think between that and even the progenitors arc, there were all these gaps in which they answered some questions during the episode, but there was also questions that they didn't answer, or they asked new questions that wasn't answered. So that kind of leads to, I don't know if Academy will cover any of these, or books or comics or other parts of the Star Trek franchise will cover some of these unanswered questions. Or it may be that we'll never know, and it's just one of these things that'll be left open. But I did like the epilogue and how they sort of gave a good send off. I think one thing actually, I rewatched just this last piece of it, and I want to just mention the music during these last few scenes between Saru's wedding all the way to the very end. I use the word melancholy, or it was a combination of being optimistic but also being sad. So the music that they played during these last few, the end of the actual episode and then the epilogue was very well done. It actually reminded me a little of Lord of the Rings or the Return of the King, sort of the ending, of a long journey. and so it was, it was well done. So yeah, those are some of the some of my thoughts.
I agree on the music. I got goosebumps with the bit of the hero send off to the Discovery, and very interesting choice to redo the refit and take it back to its original 23rd century self. And at the end of the day, when in a Star Trek series like this is classic Star Trek, where the ship is a central character and is the hero of our show, and this was its emotional send off. Jerry, we haven't got to you yet. Jerry, how your overall thoughts on the epilogue?
Yeah, I mean, I think they did the best they could with obviously the time and resources they were given. It's no, these are the Voyagers, so at least we didn't.
What is really? I mean, that's a high bar. Okay, let's calm down.
So it probably wasn't as dreadful, but yeah, I mean, I think it was a nice end off in the end. They obviously tried to tie everything up to Calypso, but I do agree. Like, I think it was incredibly heartless of them to leave Zora and Discovery just out in the middle of nowhere. And I could see it coming, because as soon as Michael Burnham said, this is a red directive, we're going to leave you out in the middle of nowhere, I was like, oh, so this is how they're going to tie into Calypso and stuff. But I guess that's just the only way they could really explain that. And it would have been nice to see the crew. And I don't know, I'm not sure, again, it's probably because of budgets and whatever, but when they included the whole sort of slow-mo hugging the crew, underneath the warm light and stuff, they could have included the new crew on as well, since obviously Rayner was there, and they would have gone on all these other adventures and stuff with the current sort of new, like, Helm and Ops crew and stuff. I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity to sort of include them there as well, since they made up the rest of the Discovery crew for this whole season 5 and things. And then at the end, I was like, if Michael Burnham is there by herself, who's going to jump Discovery to wherever they're meant to be going? How are you going to fly? So yeah. But other than that, yeah, nicely tied up as best as they could in the end.
Look, I find it's best to just not ask too many of those questions and just let it be. And I think the last person who we haven't spoken to yet is Jim. Jim, your thoughts on the epilogue?
Well, I enjoyed the epilogue, and as for how she was going to get back, I just assumed there would be a ship waiting for him when Discovery arrived at the planet. But that's just me. But as for the like, I enjoyed the epilogue. I enjoyed seeing Burnham and Book having a son. I enjoyed we've already covered Saru's wedding, so I won't even touch that one. But like, I enjoyed seeing older Saru and Burnham. Like, props to the makeup department. Like, Saru and Burnham, both dignified beyond belief, looking great with gray in their hairs.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, like, is it just me, or did Sonequa Martin Green as an older Burnham in that scene look uncannily like the actress who played her mother?
Mm-hmm. It was very well, given the time constraints they had, Jim. It was, that makeup is probably some of the best, like, rapid aging makeup I think I've ever seen in Star Trek. Right, we've come a long way since the Deadly Years, is what I'll say to that.
Yeah, it's like when that 20 years later, or however many years later it was, came on, like, I at first thought, and even after until like Book came out and started talking to her, like, even after the first couple of lines Sonequa spoke, I thought that was the actress who played her mother, like in the first couple of seasons. That's how close she looked, and even at first sounded like. It was spooky.
And
I want to add something about the epilogue, if I may.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, so I like that they brought it back to what Discovery's kind of been about from even the very first episode. It's about found family. They set themselves up with a risky kind of sentiment here in this season. The progenitors, technology, basically they set it up as like, what's the meaning of life? We're going to find out why we're all here. What does it matter? And while it's left as a we don't know who actually started this, when Sonequa's character Michael's talking to her son about like, well, how would you answer that question now? She says, sometimes life itself is meaning enough. How we choose to spend the time that we have, who we spend it with. And I think that's kind of what Discovery has been about overall.
Mhm.
And I think been a perfect answer to, you know, what is the meaning of life? Because we don't know. And all that really does matter is how we spend our lives.
That's a really, really, really lovely way to put it. And I think that through all of the division over Discovery as a show, its stories, its characters, I think there is something to be said, and I talked about this at the beginning of the episode, around how many people saw themselves on this show for the first time. And I wonder if it will age maybe better than some other Star Trek has.
Mhm.
And the appreciation for it will continue to grow.
It'll definitely age better than Riker in the TNG uniform in the Enterprise finale, that's for sure.
I know. And they were trying to de-age him in that. And I tell you what, they couldn't take the extra kegs
There was
off.
no de-aging a 50-year-old Jonathan Frakes into a 30-year-old Jonathan Frakes.
No, there was not. There was not. We're pretty much out of time, everyone. So bittersweet that we've had to do this. I wanted to pick up on a bit of a thread in the chat though before we kind of wrap up with our final thoughts. And that was from Matt Jennings sort of suggesting that, he has a feeling that we will see this crew again. And I hope that's true. One thing that I take away from this is a cast that has loved doing Star Trek. Sonequa Martin Green has always taken this so seriously. I love how she talked about Nichelle Nichols at the premiere for Discovery, leant into her and told her, this is all yours now. And she always loves telling that story. And then you see other interviews with Wilson Cruz and Doug Jones and everyone else. Like they are going to be around for a while. And I do think we'll see them again. We'll wrap up with a couple of just final thoughts, parting moments. What's next for Discovery and the Star Trek universe? Peter, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly mention really like literally the last scene of the show, because I kind of interpreted it a little bit like almost like an honor guard when Discovery was leaving the space dock and we saw all the ships and kind of lined up the shuttles and the ships. So I didn't pick it up on the first watch, but in the second watch, yeah, I kind of interpret. I don't know if it's true or not. It might be just me seeing something that's not there, but I interpret it as an honor guard, kind of to acknowledge the Discovery leaving as a ship and also as a show. So I really enjoyed the season 5, and I think, to echo what you said, I have a feeling, and I suspect that Discovery, just the way it's structured, if people watch it in a binge watch rather than week by week as it drops, I think it will be appreciated a little bit more as time goes on. And I think it's kind of like the way Enterprise is. I think that it kind of found fans after it on reruns or on streaming, and I think Discovery will be like that. And I really enjoyed it. And like you said, like we said earlier at the beginning of the show, this series sort of started this era of Trek, and because it was successful, it led to all these other series that we've seen since then. So I really thank Discovery, the creators, showrunners, cast, crew, and I mean, I'm hoping now we have Academy coming up. I think will take place in the same time frame, so I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully we'll maybe see some of the characters again on that show.
Excellent. JJ, your final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm very strongly hoping that we see this cast again in Academy. I totally appreciate the show. It brought Star Trek back. It brought, as Jonathan said, Star Trek into what I agree with him, the golden age, right? Everything that it presented. I mean, I walked away from 99% of the episodes with, wow, that just left an impact on me, right? and there's been constant conversations that I've had with friends about the episodes, and you learn about yourself with them. And this is one show that did that none of the rest of the Star Treks did to this extent. And I do agree that it's going to age well. It's yeah. I hope we see a feature film. That would be amazing. But at the very least, I hope we at least see it in Academy.
Absolutely. Jonathan?
Well, I'll say what I said at the beginning here. I'm really grateful for having had Discovery and it having opened these doors for other Star Trek. I think many of us would not have met each other if there had not been a Discovery, let alone, what transpired after that. As far as my hopes, I have high hopes for Section 31's film. Michelle Yeoh, I'm sure, is going to knock it out of the park. We can thank Discovery and the showrunners and Paramount and everyone for having put together a really amazing cast from the beginning. And despite, having done these changes over time and thrust into different timelines, they've gave us, really interesting, entertaining stories that are certainly going to be rewatchable. I think will not be fully appreciated in their current time, but as years pass, I think more and more people will spend time going into it, binge watching it through streaming and say, like, where was this show? How did I not hear about this? As we've heard about, other Star Treks during their time becoming more popular after it's gone. I have high hopes for Starfleet Academy. I really do hope Mary Wiseman's going to be heavily involved in that, because her character adds a certain levity to the situation, and she is constantly an advocate, not only for the Federation, but for whoever it is she's talking to, trying to say, like, no, you matter. Like, let me, look at this from another type of perspective. Similar to kind of, Jet Reno's character, who obviously was more of a dry type of wit and comedy, but I do think there's a lot of potential for the Starfleet Academy. And I have a lot of high hopes for the final season of Lower Decks as well. That's another show that, when they announced saying that we're going to do a comedy animated Star Trek show, I thought, man, they are going to ruin the brand with this. And it's turned out to be my favorite Star Trek that's currently on. So I have a lot of high hopes for the final season of that and where Star Trek will go going forward.
Beautiful. Thank you. And Jerry?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have, on a lot of the guys in the panel have already probably said what a lot of us were already thinking about, how we should be really thankful for Discovery coming on and being created, for it sprouting this sort of new age of Trek for the current fans of the show, as well as the future generations who will hopefully, no pun intended, discover, this series as well as the other spin-offs it's created due to it being around. And I think growing up with 90s Trek myself, having Next Generation and Voyager being like some of my favorite Star Treks, I was a little bit wary of coming into Discovery and sort of jumping into something a little bit new, and it took me a bit of a while to sort of appreciate the story that they were telling. But I think it speaks volumes for a show like Star Trek Discovery, when someone like me who's deeply rooted in old Trek has come to really appreciate the character growth of a lot of the characters on the show, and can really also relate to a lot of the messages that are on the screen. And then as for the finale itself, it had everything that you would want in Star Trek. It had diplomacy, it had action, it had science and philosophy and great speeches in it to really, I think, tie everything together as the finale for season 5, as well as this, the Trek franchise and Discovery as a whole, I think. And in terms of the future, I've no doubt we'll see these characters again in hopefully some of the future shows of Trek, and I really look forward to seeing where they go from here.
And Jim McMahon, take us home.
Well, I think we will see some of the characters in Academy. I think they tipped their hat to that in the epilogue, when I think it was they said something like Tilly was the longest tenured professor at the academy or something like that. So I think that was a send off to like characters showing up on Academy at some point. And from there, who knows? I'm just gonna remain positive about the future.
I think that's why we're Star Trek fans, right? Positivity for the future, hope for the future. Thank you all. For those of you who have joined every week, either in the chat or live with me here on the panel, thank you for just chatting Star Trek. That's probably the greatest gift I feel like Discovery has given me is this wonderful international community of friends and connections. It's and thank you to yourselves as well as supporters of the BQN network for our Patreon. We will be doing more of this. The Hive Mind will be back monthly. Our script reads, our table reads are happening monthly. And the hosts and I have already chatted about bringing back a similar show for the final season of Lower Decks, which we will creatively call Warp Me. So keep your eyes out for that. We will be doing the exact same thing for that. Thank you all for your time. And remember, if you are watching or listening to the replay and you want to be involved in the network as well, you can jump on to patreon.com/BQN and support the network. That's it for now. Thank you so much, everyone. Remember to live long and prosper. Peace out, everyone.